Atheist Nomads, episode 355. Let's talk about Satan.
The podcast you're about to listen to includes cursing and talking about hoo-haws. Please be advised.
Welcome to another episode of Atheist Nomads. I am Dustin, and it's just me today. I am doing the trial beta test of the live streaming on YouTube, and it looks like there is one or two people watching, depending on whether or not I actually get counted into that. And I also have two people listening in on Discord, so this should be fun. I'm looking forward to getting live feedback. I did figure out today, because, you know, Kylie's almost 2.5, so she is full-blown toddler and really starting to get into toddler eating, and that is a struggle. I never really appreciated how much of a pain in the ass it is to try to feed a 2-year-old, and how much of a fight it is to feed a 2-year-old who is hungry, who wants food, but won't eat anything that you want to give said 2-year-old. I'm also starting to understand why parents who can afford it are going to places like Whole Foods and Trader Joe's and paying shit tons of money for ridiculously overpriced products. Because if you want something that's quick and easy, grab and go snack food for a toddler, which 2-year-olds eat like baby birds, like literally it's like every hour she wants a snack. And yes, that's good. She's growing. Her brain is growing. She's learning things all the time. She's actively doing things. She's moving around. She's burning lots of calories. And I know at this age, like 60% of all of her calories are going to her brain activity. And that's awesome and exciting. And every hour. And it is almost impossible to keep up with that. So yeah, prepackaged individual unit snack foods are absolutely essential to maintaining sanity. Yes, I know there are ways to put in the effort into preparing snacks the right way, but who the fuck has time for that? And I can definitely appreciate why people are willing to spend the money for organic and natural products, because they tend to have less sugar. Because if you look at anything else, it's all advertised as low fat, which if you're giving it to a 2-year-old, who fucking cares? They need fat to grow brain cells. And any product that is low fat, okay, not any, the vast majority of products that are low fat have sugar added in to replace the missing flavor from removing the fat, because flavor for humans comes from fat and sugar. So it is insane how much of that stuff is just loaded with sugar. And yes, Kylie needs a lot of sugar. If 60% of her calories are going to her brain, she needs a lot of sugar to help fuel that brain. She has tons of energy. She needs sugar to keep up those energy levels. That's all fine and good, but you don't need to load everything with sugar. And so I'm starting to get it. Yeah. I will definitely have a newfound, I guess, respect for people when you see them pull out all those kids snacks that appear to just be overpriced junk food. Yes, they are. It is overpriced junk food, but that's to be, less loaded with sugar. Yeah. I am not done with that rant, actually, because it's also just been interesting seeing how she's starting to get to be a pickier eater and trying to prepare food that tastes good. Unless it's sweet, she probably doesn't want it. And thinking it through, it makes perfect sense. Evolutionarily, humans are, we want fat and sugar. We like those flavors the best, especially sugar, because historically, when calories were hard to come by, foods that were what we consider to be sweet or savory were the high-calorie, high-value foods that you'd want to eat, because they're well worth it. They're worth the effort to get it. They're worth the effort to eat it. But we are in a world of plenty, or at least those of us in the Western world live in a world of plenty and don't need to worry about are you going to get enough calories? There is a huge issue, of course, and especially with lower income people and families who are food insecure, despite being in the developed world where there shouldn't be anyone who is food insecure, where they get a lot of crap that is calorie rich and nutrient deficient, which causes its own issues. But so yeah, it all makes sense that something like yogurt she's going to like, cheese she's going to like, fruit she's going to like, and god damn, that kid would eat fruit nonstop if you'd let her. That's not a bad thing unless it's the only thing she's eaten. She needs something more than just sugar and fiber. And to get that variety, yeah, that's hard to get in because very reasonably, when humans were pre-agricultural and when during human evolution, the risk to babies and toddlers of eating something that would kill them would have been incredibly high. It's still pretty high because little kids put everything in their mouths. And being picky means you are less likely to put something you shouldn't in your mouth. And if you spit out anything that isn't either, fruit or cheese or tastes like fruit or cheese, then odds are you're not going to eat anything that's going to kill you. Fruit is one of those, and anything that's really high in sugar, when it goes bad because of the sugar, bacteria feed on it quickly. You're going to know it's bad really quickly, and even just by smell, and definitely by taste, which that's a good survival instinct and just useful for survival, except for in the modern world where it's just annoying. Just got a comment from Pat on Discord. Well, I never thought of picky eating as an evolutionary asset. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that until today. And it's amazing how many things, and like we identify as cute is what looks like a human baby, because keeping a human baby alive is how our species survives. So anything that has traits that kind of resembles a baby is cute. Things that are, and yeah, so evolutionarily that created and that need to nurture things that are cute. Dogs and cats have taken advantage of it, but that was an evolutionary adaptation to help keep humans alive. And it's amazing how many of those there are. And it's a new challenge to try to figure out how to adapt to that and have food that tastes good that a toddler will eat. Tonight was an interesting experiment with pasta with a much simpler than we normally do tomato sauce, grilled chicken, and broccoli. And Kylie had everything completely separate, and she ate almost all of it. At lunch day, she didn't want to touch the sandwich at all. So keeping things separate seems to help, and yeah, that's life now. All right, so for the main topic today, I want to talk about Satan. And I've talked about Satan at various points throughout the history of the podcast, both where that character has come up in news stories and just in various Dustin Off the Degree segments, interviews with people from the Satanic Temple and the like. And the Satan character is really, really amazing. We first see Satan showing up after the exile, the Jewish exile. When you look at the texts that were the most likely ones to have been written prior to the exile, the way they're all written is there are many gods. They have their god, and their god does both good and evil. After the exile, you have everything bad is done by the bad divine being, and everything good is by God. And Satan literally just means the adversary. So you have God and you have the adversary. And God took care of the Jews, was good to the Jews, but because they kept worshiping idols, God stopped protecting them, and they started to, and that allowed the devil to take them over through the Babylonians. That was kind of the post-exilic way of looking at that. Christianity inherited that from Judaism and took it so much further. an important part of that was Christianity also picking up the idea of an eternal hell from the Greeks. So you take the Jewish Satan and the Greek Hades, and you put those two together, and Hades not just as the Greek god Hades, but the place Hades, the Greek version of hell. You combine those two things together, and you get what would eventually be described as eternal burning and torment, like the worst torture you could imagine over and over every day. And it's amazing how powerful that is. Judaism hasn't really held on much to the concept of a Satan as a literal person. For the most part, Jews view Satan as a metaphorical adversary, and Jews throughout the years have mostly viewed Satan as a metaphorical figure, literary character, more or less. Whereas Christians and Muslims have held to a literal Satan as a literal being with his own mind and will and activity in the world, along with the help of his demons. This is insanely powerful and is a huge factor in why Christianity and Islam are the two most dominant religions in the world. It really makes sense. When you look at the kind of conventional Christian view of hell, it's you have, if you do what God says and you follow God, then you get to go to paradise forever. And if you don't, well, that means you're on the devil's side and he gets you, so you go to hell. That is a way of, it makes it so that the religious leaders can put a spin on it to always be pushing people to do what they want them to keep keep dangling that carrot of heaven while continually hitting them with the stick of hell. Fire and brimstone preachers are the most famous for that. And it was interesting for me growing up in a tradition that did not believe in a literal eternal hell, that there was a literal hell, but it was going to be an event, not an eternal place. And that destruction was, the lake of fire was a lake that you got thrown into to be destroyed, not a lake you got thrown into to be permanently burning for all time. So there wasn't the threat of hell. There was the carrot, but that stick wasn't quite there. Except nobody is going to get rid of that stick. And the way Adventists did it was by really playing up the battle between Jesus and Satan in the end days and pushing that we are in the end days right now. So you have to make sure that you're on God's side so that you will be on God's side in the end. Otherwise, when the time of trouble comes, you'll be... and this is where it gets a little bit weird. If you're good, you're in the time of trouble and getting persecuted and hunted down and probably going to get killed. And if you're bad, you get to stay with everybody else and be safe and just get forced to get the mark of the beast. But who cares? You're already on the beast side. And have to go to church on Sunday, but who cares? You're already on the devil's side, so why does that matter? So it's the good people who get all the bad stuff. The getting hunted by the government, the being chased into the hills, thrown in jail, executed. That's what's going to happen to the good people. But then they have the time of Jacob's trouble, the very end of the time of trouble, where God completely removes his protection from the earth. And any unforgiven sin, as in any sin you haven't confessed to God, the devil knows and will be allowed at that point to torment you about it forever and try to mess you up. Even though by that time your fate's already sealed, so it doesn't make any difference. It terrifies Adventist youth. There are a lot who get severely traumatized if they, especially kids that were, or people who were growing up in the Adventist church in the 80s and early 90s, who were hearing those stories a lot. A lot of them really got traumatized by it. I was fortunate to not hear too much about that and not get traumatized by it. But it's crazy the way that holding power can develop. And in my own personal situation, it was when my doubts started in my, and I talked about this a few weeks ago in episodes 49 and 50, or 50 and 51. I think it was 49 and 50, 349 and 350. We talked about my personal story in religion and leaving religion. And during that, those last several years, I had a serious question as to whether those doubts were coming from within me or whether they were coming from Satan. And I can distinctly remember sometimes, like, there's this one particular morning I remember very vividly. I was in the shower thinking about, like, doing the math trying to do the math on what were the odds that this was Satan tricking me up, or that I was actually right and Christianity is bullshit. That terrified me. I would actually say it was paralyzing almost. I couldn't let go of that because of the chance that was just the devil tripping me up so that I wouldn't be a minister to bring more people to God, so that they could go to heaven. And that if I wasn't part of God's plan, then I was going to be hindering his plan. And if that's all just Satan's work getting me off that path, then how could I trust those doubts? Like, even if there's just a chance that that's what it was, how could I trust them? Which created this weird paradox where I effectively believed in Satan longer than I believed in God because of the fear that Satan could be trying to trip me up. And with that being so much more powerful. And with various interviews we've done on the podcast over the years, I've heard plenty of stories from former evangelicals who had similar experiences where their fear of hell continued well after leaving the church, and continued for years after becoming an atheist. And that's just messed up. This whole Satan construct is a very, very potent tool. And it's also just kind of interesting to see, moving back into the more the big picture on it, the way it's developed over the years, because the modern version of hell comes from Dante's Inferno. It's a couple hundred years old, that idea, that particular version of it. But yeah, so that concept, it started off in the original Greek. It was the language that was used was vague enough to not really be clear what it meant. In some cases, they would use a transliteration from Hebrew to describe the place where bad people go. And in other cases, they'd use just Hades, the Greek word for it. And that is without more detail, it's not a particularly well-defined concept. It's something that had to be worked on over many, many, many years. It's something you can see looking at, like, some of what drove the Protestant Reformation was the sale of indulgences. That was because the Catholic Church had set up a system of if you're super good, you go straight to heaven when you die. If you're good, but not almost perfect, then you go to purgatory, and then you have to suffer minor torment until you've worked off that sin. And they would sell indulgences to take off, in some cases, millions of years of purgatory, because you could be good enough to get into heaven in a million years. Not good enough to get in now, but good enough to get in a million years. But then if you were bad enough to not even qualify for that, which literally meant to be that bad, you had to be not just like completely not Christian or excommunicated by the Pope. And then you didn't even get into purgatory. You went straight to hell. And well, nobody wanted that. So you had to be good enough to keep in the, at least not necessarily in the good graces of the church, but at least not piss off the church. And if you can try to keep people in line with that, that's one thing. But if that's not enough, then make some money off of it. That's a big part of how a lot of the basilicas in Rome and across most of Europe are so ornate. A lot of that was funded by selling indulgences. Even earlier than that, the Crusades were effectively an indulgence. It was priests would go around and recruit people to take the cross to the Holy Land and try to liberate the Holy Land so that Christians would be safe to worship there, just like they always had been. And as an interesting bit that ended up happening was when the Crusaders went to Judea, Palestine, or whatever the Arab rulers at the time called it, they slaughtered everyone. If you were brown, you were dead. So they killed Arab Muslims. They killed Christians who identified as Greek. They killed Jews. They didn't really care. They just killed anybody they saw. And they restricted pilgrimage, whereas the Muslim rulers had been there prior, allowed anybody to take pilgrimages through their land to go to their holy sites, regardless of their religion. Well, at least if you were in one of the peoples of the book, as the Muslims would refer to them, the Christians, Jews, and Muslims, you could have free passage to go on your pilgrimage. Probably have to pay a tax, but you could do it. And the Crusaders went, and in the name of getting into heaven or getting somebody else into heaven, they slaughtered a bunch of people, including other Christians, and they stopped a lot of pilgrimages because people didn't speak the right language. And it was the tool to recruit people to go fight in the Crusades was mostly, it'll get you into heaven because you'll be on God's side, and the people you'll be fighting are on Satan's side. So take the cross, fight for God, fight against Satan, and you'll go to heaven, or a loved one will go to heaven, or you'll work off some of your time in purgatory. And that was enough to get people to go and commit horrible, horrible atrocities. It is really an amazingly powerful concept. And it's interesting when you see more liberal Christianity, like the Congregationalists and the like. They mostly abandoned that concept of hell and Satan, and they aren't doing well numbers-wise right now. But also right now, no Christians are doing well numbers-wise, at least not in the US or Europe. Kylie just came through and got books and is now going back to her room. Interesting. Got some feedback from Celia. She wrote, "Hey, Dustin, I'm listening to Atheist Nomads. You got a couple things wrong when you and Lauren were talking about religion in North Korea. You mentioned Jushi. You pronounced it as Jushi. It's pronounced more like Jushi. She is in cherry, or Juchi. But your description of its principles and teachings is pretty accurate. You also said Korea was occupied by Japan for 60 to 70 years. It's more like 35, actually. There were attempts by Japan to colonize Korea as early as 1870s, when Japan was emerging into a modern nation under Emperor Meiji's modernization reforms. And Japan, along with Western powers, including the United States, forced Korea to sign unequal economic treaties that were backed by military force to pressure the Koreans to capitulate, which slowly stripped away Korea's sovereignty over decades. So Korea's Joseon dynasty did not end officially until 1910, when Japan forced Korea to sign an annexation treaty, which began Japan's official rule over Korea until 1945. And yep, Celia, you're absolutely correct. I screwed up. Yeah, it was only 1910 that Japan solidified its occupation of Korea. that's not a particularly long period of time. They did enough damage in that time period, and definitely had, like, it's crazy looking at Asia in that time period because of the way European powers were meddling and destabilizing China with the Opium Wars. And then you had Russia coming in and adding its own influence, coming across Siberia. And then Japan. And then the Russo-Japanese War. Yeah, that was 1905. And then after Japan beat Russia, they just didn't stop. It's crazy to think about it, but in all practicality, like the war in the Pacific, yeah, it definitely didn't start with Pearl Harbor, and you could pretty easily argue that, yeah, that was the start of that was Japan's expansion, and that would have been 1910. They made a big mark in that time period, but when you're trying to figure out how to do imperialism, which is inherently ugly as a thing, it's, you can really do a lot of damage fast. And have a little bit more feedback here from Steve Chappett on Twitter. Not as much about hoo-haws as you might expect. That was sharing out the episode. And then also from Steve Chappett, a look at awful advice on coronavirus. Don't drink poison. That was about episode 355. Waiting for Wrath at For Wrath, and their new podcast is Interesting If True. At Atheist Nomads, vaping bleach sounds like a self-solving problem. And they included with that a GIF of Professor Farnsworth on Futurama saying, "I don't want to live on this planet anymore." Yeah, vaping bleach is definitely a self-limiting problem. And it's one of those that is, unfortunately, one of the roles of government is to keep people from killing themselves through their own stupidity and protecting idiots from, offing themselves by listening to bad advice from the fucking president. Ugh. Yeah, it's a self-limiting problem, but then again, the whole point of everything we're doing in response to COVID-19 is trying to avoid overwhelming the healthcare system. And if a bunch of people start vaping bleach, that's going to overwhelm the healthcare system really fast. Well, this week's episode ended up being pretty short, and I did warn that you could expect that to happen more frequently. So yeah, this was a shorter one, and pretty much off the cuff, because I was running out of ideas on what to talk about without getting into all this super redundant news. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about, just having this little topic and just talking about that and my rant. And we've got an interview next week. It's a follow-up from an interview, I think it was about 1.5 or 2 years ago, with the latest developments in a story coming out of Australia. So that'll be fun. And then got another one scheduled for a couple weeks out, and should be getting some more scheduled soon. And the live stream setup testing went very well. I'm still waiting on a cable and an adapter, and then we'll be able to use the nice big camera that will, and do a 2-camera setup overall for the live stream. I think this is going to be a lot of fun and will work well, and with kind of a mostly permanent setup to be able to do it, it's going to be, and one that just blends into the living room. This is going to make it a lot easier to do more live streaming, and that's something we definitely plan on doing more of as we continue through the pandemic and beyond. So this is coming along, and definitely planning on doing another live stream that will be probably more publicly announced soon, and there'll probably be another beta test stream for patrons once the camera comes in. Got a couple other scenarios to beta test, so might be doing a bit more of that, so patrons definitely watch for that. And I'll be making a point of doing a lot more on the Discord channel, so check that out if which you can find the link to at atheistnomads.com/discord. If you want to support the show, you can find out how at atheistnomads.com/donate. And if you want to contact us, you can go to atheistnomads.com/contact or email us at contact@atheistnomads.com. We also still love getting those voice messages over SpeakPipe, so check that out. We really do like getting voice feedback. It's always the best, but I know email is usually the most convenient. And that wraps it up for this week. So remember, not all those who wander are lost.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Atheist Nomads. You can find show notes and contact information at atheistnomads.com. Follow us on Twitter at Atheist Nomads, and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Atheist Nomads. Please subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcatcher of choice, and while you're there, feel free to leave us a review. Theme music is courtesy of Sturdy Fred. Until next time, this has been the Atheist Nomads.